Hello and welcome everybody tuning in today. I'm Billy Mitchell, editor-in-chief of FedScoop, and today I'm joined by Mike Younkers, the Senior Director of Federal Systems Engineering at Cisco. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Billy. Thank you for having me today, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to chat, and I'm happy to do so today. Let's talk about some big themes at this year's Fed FWD Summit. I know there's a lot going on, and I want to start with, over the past year, how federal agencies have moved in their journey to digital transformation. There's a lot to unfold under that, things like cloud adoption, cybersecurity, remote work. So let's just hear it. What's the last year, what have those big trends been?
Yeah, no shocker here with everything that's going on in the world. I think that last piece that you brought up, the remote work, is really the thing that has accelerated. And I think when we were looking from an industry point of view, how long we thought it was going to take the government to move forward here, before the pandemic, we were projecting like 5 to 7 years for transformation that has taken place in less than a year. I mean, it was months that people had to transform and get comfortable with secure remote working. The security piece of that has been an interesting journey that we've been on together over the past year. We being the government and industry that supports the government, there are a lot of challenges out there, as we've seen, with a lot of interesting and very broad attacks coming at us from nation states. So the security side of that is still of heavy interest with a lot of work to do. But just that rapid transformation to secure remote work, and then the understanding that the government can operate remotely was probably the most interesting thing that's happened in the last year, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's plenty of emerging technologies that are also coming on the scene these days. AI is one of the big ones we're hearing a lot about, but I'm sure there are others. So, what are those emerging technologies on the horizon that are making a major impact across federal operations, and why would you say they're important?
Yeah, I was with a colleague yesterday from GSA, and we were talking about emerging technologies, and he made the comment that he always laughs when he hears that term emerging technology, because in the technology space, it feels like it's always changing. It's so rapidly accelerating and emerging. So, but there are interesting things. You mentioned artificial intelligence. I think the key to being able to leverage artificial intelligence is that focus on the data. So the other thing that we've seen as the government's migration towards cloud technologies, and I don't just mean, using cloud as someone else's computer in the sky. I mean the notion of doing cloud best practices, regardless of where you're actually operating those practices. It all comes down to the data. And I think that what we're finding is the ability to consolidate data, but ultimately secure that data, and then be able to run some trained models on top of that to gain the insights and benefits that we could get from artificial intelligence and or machine learning, to use whichever favorite buzzword you want to use there. The point, though, is you have to have access to the data, ubiquitous access to the data, but that data itself needs to be secure, and it needs to be authorized access. So we don't just want everyone to have access to it, who necessarily shouldn't have access to it. But where there are things like weather data, I'm intrigued by the ability from agencies like NOAA to be able to share insight with others. So there is this idea of opening up data and being collaborative around it. At the same time, there's this notion of securing data, because there's some data we don't want everyone to have access to.
Sure.
So at the bottom of all that, it comes down to the data: who has access to it, how are you securing it, and then what can you do to leverage that data and take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. It's all about the data. Uh, as we close out, Mike, let's focus on another big theme that has been spoken about a lot at the summit, and that is a platform-centric view of IT. As agencies look to achieve mission success, how can a platform-centric view help them help them empower themselves with IT?
Yeah, this is one of the things that I think people miss in this transformation to digitization. The notion of digitizing whatever it is that you want to digitize, your workforce, your strategy, your customer facing or constituent facing things. That idea of digitization has a underpinning underneath of it that is critically important, which is a platform approach. You can't consolidate data. You can't grant access to data. You can't secure data. You can't apply any of the emerging technologies if you don't have this idea of how are you going to consolidate that, to get access to it. So the idea here, in this regard, is accept that, lean into that. That requires a platform approach. No longer siloed, individual projects doing their own thing. You have to start to consolidate these things. You have to take a platform approach, and then accept the fact that it is at an enterprise level is the only way you can be successful at doing this thing. You can't do it in the individual project-based way we used to do things of days of old. You have to embrace and accept a platform notion, because that's the only way you can be successful on your journey to digitization.
Mike, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Billy.